my guest today is Phil Bak. Phil is the founder and CEO of Armada ETF Advisors, a residential REIT. He is a former MD at the New York Stock Exchange, and he is one of the early adopters in ETFs. He's been in ETFs for the last 15 years. Phil, thank you for being on.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Great to be here.
I wanted to start with, you've had a lot of criticisms of the Fed in your writing, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. But something I think is interesting about what the Fed's doing, and you don't just see it at the Fed, you see it everywhere today, where I feel like they're making life a closed loop with no touch point in any external reality. They're just, obviously money is just a claim on wealth. It's not wealth itself. Printing money does nothing. If aliens landed and they said, "What are you doing to stimulate your economy?" And we said, "Well, we're printing money," they would slap us and get back in their ships and leave. and yet this has become it's something that's certainly useful at the margin, but it's now become the thing. It's the thing we do. I'm curious, what do you make of that?
I think the root issue, right? We can talk about the Fed and the X's and O's and what they're doing and the timing of what they're doing and all that, but it's really about identifying the root issue. And the root issue is it's the same across everything. Everything that we're seeing now in life, it's hubris. It's the idea that the brilliance, the unique brilliance possessed by these individuals and these individuals alone, that they got through their econ degrees and their understanding of Keynesian bullshit and whatever it is, that they have this ability to control markets in a way that nobody else, none of us can see. Like, they have this unique ability to manage markets, right? And I think, you talk about free markets, right? Pure free markets without any intervention or anything. And, the feeling is that, well, we get all these bubbles and there's all these, problems. We could have market crashes. Like, we can't trust just the free market and let the free market be free. And I think a lot of people need to, read things like iPencil, right? And need to kind of get back to basics and understand how good free markets are and how wealthy we've become in the West and in the US as a people and as an entire globe, based on having the freest markets that we've ever had in history. And we're losing that. We're losing that because, the short term, these people think, oh, God forbid the S&P drops by 5%. We have to do something. Somebody has to do something, right? The Fed has to do something. And they don't think about unintended consequences. And they don't think about, what they're doing. Does it even, they have these two-dimensional models, these two-dimensional econ models that are so rudimentary and so they don't even pass the smell test to anybody who thinks independently. And they think that they can just, that high prices in markets are an absolute good, and that they can, if they can get the S&P, or if they can get markets to be, going up indefinitely, then that's a good. And it's not. That's the big lie. It's not, right? Because new investors come in at inflated prices and unsustainable prices are due to lose money. And you think about a market that's overpriced, that then compounds and becomes more overpriced and more and more and more. Obviously, it's not a permanent condition. It's not sustainable that things can be overpriced and continuously, ever increasingly overpriced for an indefinite period. So if you take a step back and say, let's look at markets on the most basic level, right? Markets are a claim on, publicly listed companies. You have debt markets, you have different things, right? The global economy, the growth of the global economy over time is going to be whatever it is. And let's say we measure that by GDP or inflation or whatever you want to use to measure, how is the global economy doing? And then you take markets and you say, well, markets have to outpace the global economy because there's an equity risk premium or whatever stupid nonsense people come up with to try to justify the idea that stocks have been outperforming the rest of the global market, for forever, right? So let's say you say, all right, we're going to create an agency with an unlimited budget whose job it is to make sure that continues to happen. So all of our retirements go up. You're not allowed to save money anymore. We're going to disincentivize using every trick in the book to stop people from saving money because we want everyone to throw money into the casino, into the stock market, to keep putting buy pressure, to keep this thing from going up. And let's say they pull it off, which they did for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. Stocks keep going up more than, inflation or GDP or whatever like the baseline is, right? Well, I mean, extrapolate that model out over 100 years and then extrapolate it over 1,000 years. Do it over infinity years, right? What happens? Like the market just keeps going, getting bigger and bigger. And, the rest of us in the real world are growing, things are just growing naturally at a more modest pace. It's not a permanently sustainable model, but that's the model that they're trying to achieve. And so what you end up happening is you have boom bust cycles, right? You have boom cycles where they turn all the dials they can. They artificially depress rates. They get all the savers to put money into the markets. They do everything they can to promote the markets. They do successfully. The markets run, and then eventually the markets run out of gas. They can't anymore. They come crashing down, and you get these boom bust cycles. And the irony is back to what I originally said about hubris and managed markets and unintended consequences is that the whole point of having a Fed was to manage these bubbles.
Right,
that was the whole point. Was that we have all these crashes. Oh, we need an independent body that can manage the markets and make sure that we don't have these crashes. And all they do is exacerbate it. All they do is they create more bubbles, bigger crashes at an ever increasing pace. All their policies, they have to put more and more money to work to affect these policies to get less and less over time, more dilutive results of their policies. We did more QE last year than we did through the entire global financial crisis. It was totally unnecessary. And now we're seeing the after effects of it. So, the core root issue here is hubris. It's these people thinking that they have the ability to manage markets when they don't. Free markets manage markets. Humans mess up markets, right? They create unintended consequences.
I still can't believe that last February and last March, when we had double-digit inflation or 9% inflation, something close to that, the Fed was still printing money and easing. It's amazing. You almost can't believe it. It's crazy. It's kind of like when you read about how Paul Volcker beat inflation, and people are like, well, he did this and he did that. You know what he did? He stopped monetizing the debt. And he raised interest rates, but he stopped easing. It's crazy. It's amazing that this is a mystery to people.
We all saw it coming. Every thinking person saw it coming. And the fact is, a lot of people are incentivized. People get AUM-based fees based on essentially where the market is, where the beta is, right? Everyone was enjoying the good times. And nobody had the guts to stand up and say, we got to show some restraint, right? Everyone's getting high. Everyone's, it was so obvious. People are buying $1 million metaverse boats, right? And every, Dogecoin was worth I think $1 trillion market. It was so obvious at the time. There was so much excess. It was outrageous. And they were still had their foot on the gas for an entire year longer than they should. And, look, if you give somebody a tool, they're going to use it, right? And you give somebody an incredible amount of wealth that they could spend through quantitative easing, basically just spending money through their buddies without any consequence. Doesn't cost them a penny. They have zero skin in the game. They're going to use it. They're going to use the money. It's fun. It's they feel powerful. They feel like they're doing the right thing. And that's what they did. They used every last dollar for as long as they could. I'm sure they enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone in their country club was kissing their ass and trying to get a piece of it. And they got to Goldman and BlackRock and all these people were huge beneficiaries. And that's the companies that these people work for and the circles that they travel in. And it was, I'm sure, very intoxicating to them. It did a lot of damage. And anybody who's a thinking person could have seen that coming.
It's interesting. There's a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, a famous philosopher, and he's basically saying, he says, the real world, the imaginary world is far larger than the real world, meaning it's just a far larger, richer thing. And what's interesting is that utopians want to take us into that imaginary world. I feel like, and today there's the technology and there's the belief where people are willing to do that. And if you look, I feel like what the Fed is doing is it's a big piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece. You see it with everything. Apple has created its own world. They have created their own ecosystem where they run it. You do it their way or that's it. And you see it with ideology. We live in such an ideology-based society, which is shocking because we're so free in a lot of ways. There's a lot of wonderful freedoms out there today that I think anybody, regardless of your politics, would really like. But it's fascinating the degree to which that ideology, it traps us in mazes of abstraction. It's a completely imaginary world. I'm curious, do you see that as well? Where do you see sort of the utopians finally having their chance?
I think that's very well said. I haven't heard the word utopians used in this context. I think financial utopians is a pretty good way to describe some of these Keynesians, And every time something, every time there's a pullback in the markets or some new unintended consequences pops up, which it always does, it's always, hey, I know, let's do this or that. Let's mint $1 trillion coin, right? Let's find some ridiculous harebrained scheme to fix it because we have the ability as humans to fix the markets, right? To fix it. And it's the opposite. It's all they're doing is creating more and more perversions on top of a perfect system. The free markets are a perfect system, in my view. Now, that doesn't mean that they're perfect for everybody in every sense, right? I mean, you still have to manage monopolies. There's still problems with free markets, but they're perfect relative to everything else. And I think utopians is a really nice way to put it. It's like, hey, if we just figure out the exact point on the curve where we start, raising or managing interest rates, if we just, print the right amount of money, then we can have perfect financial conditions. And it's laughable. And I think, from a broader, you're talking about it more from a broader standpoint, the zeitgeist. My personal opinion here is that human beings are, we have for thousands and thousands of years, we've had religion as a huge part of our life. I think we're wired as humans, we're wired for religion. And over the last generation or two, religion has become a very diminished part of society in every way. And we've abandoned, me personally, but I think by and large, we've abandoned the church of your choice, the religion of your choice. When I grew up, everyone that I knew went to, church or synagogue on a pretty regular basis, right? And you don't hear about that anymore. Churches are empty. People don't talk about religion. They certainly don't talk about it with any respect. And I'm not making a theological, I mean, that's, that is what it is, right? I'm not saying that's good or bad. That is what it is. But if you say that humans are wired this way, and we're looking for leadership, and we're looking for ideology, and we're dreaming of this utopia, and all these kind of ripple effects of being a culture that is defined by its religion in large part, then other things are going to step into the void. And there's no doubt.
Oh yeah.
We're seeing now other things step into the void, and then within markets, you call them financial utopians. I think that's a great term. But also in politics and other areas, we're seeing religious fervor in some of these things that politics should just be like wonky policy stuff, right? Like how much do we spend on helping people who can't afford a square meal in a home, right? Like we should all kick in for that. We should all kick in for the fire department, right? We all want to have someone to call if the house is on fire. There are parts of government that make a lot of sense. But now, what's happening now with a lot of politicization of different areas of life and just the weight of gravity of politics and some of these discourses is it's taking on a much more religious tones than I've ever seen in my life, and I think that's why I think it's filling the void that we've left.
Yeah, that's interesting. It really is. The religious impulse must be satisfied, and it's interesting. You see today people who aren't quote unquote religious. They're the most fundamentalist people out there. It is crazy. There are times where I have to pinch myself because our society is so free in so many ways. It's wonderful that gay people are no longer shat upon. Yeah, I saw that my whole life, and it's wonderful that they're not. And trans people and all that. I think it's great. I want people to have go do you. It's great, but then we don't actually have that. What fascinates me is that the aggregate amount of hatred and bigotry in our society, I don't think has actually gone down. I'm not even sure it can go down. All that happens is the objects of hate change. So we just hate different people. We used to hate people like this, and now instead of hating a gay person, now we hate a plumber from Iowa. This guy's secretly some bigot who we need to monitor, and is secretly this authoritarian. I think that's crazy.
That's right. If you want to see real hatred and bigotry, go to a college campus to a pro-life speech and see how the people that believe in that. Now, you may think that those people are truly evil. Okay, you may think that the plumber in Iowa is truly a bigot and all that, and then they're worthy of your scorn. I personally think that a lot of these people are being painted as themselves bigots, as themselves, trash, unintelligent. They're full of hate. Because it allows people to feel a sense of superiority and to then in turn hate those people. I can punch a Nazi, right? We can all agree.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a Nazi right here, a true Nazi. Punch them, right? They're despicable, evil people. So then that becomes the tool that a lot of people have used to other and to hate on other people. It's like, oh, okay, everyone I disagree with, everyone in the Midwest is a bigot. Everyone who's a Republican is a bad person. They're all evil and therefore worthy of their scorn. And a lot of people have been unable to resist the urge to use those labels as a way to justify their own horrible behavior towards them. There's not a lot of kindness from the left towards, like you said, the plumber in Iowa, right? You take an overweight, blue collar, white, Midwestern man, right? And you put him in San Francisco in a cafe and you look at the way he's treated as badly or worse than a lot of the people that are more broadly recognized as, victims of our society have been treated. And it's not a good thing. There's always an overcorrection, there's always on these things an overcorrection. And it's a very unfortunate situation.
But it's interesting. It does stem from this religious impulse. I think a lot of it does. People really think they are being heroes by slandering some innocent person or hating some innocent person, and they really think they're fighting the good fight. It's this desperate kind of clawing for meaning. It's about more than just, I think, social power and clout and those kind of cheap things. It's deeper than that. People really feel this in their hearts. But I wanted to, it's interesting. You're from Michigan, right?
Yeah, I'm in Detroit. I actually grew up in New York, in the suburbs of New York City. But I've been out here for about 10 years. And I think, and I was on Wall Street, right? Not only was I in New York, I was working on Wall Street for a good part of my career. I was working literally on Broad and Wall at the New York Stock Exchange. So I'm very, I grew up in good circumstances. I grew up in very good circumstances. And I have a very, I think, clear view to the world on which I come from. But I've spent 10 years out in Detroit, in Michigan. And, I've been lucky enough to branch out to circles very different from the communities I grew up in. And I think I have a very good insight into people that are very different from the circles that I grew up in. And it's given me, I think, a perspective that a lot of people don't have. A lot of people, a lot of people are very dismissive of flyover country and people that see things differently. And I think I've been very lucky to have, been exposed to different kinds of people where I can see, I think, the humanity, but also see the points that, where people are coming from very conflicting camps.
Yeah, I'm from South Dakota originally, and which is obviously very different from Michigan, but it was, I can't square what people say about the people there with what I know and what I've seen. I lived there for a long time, and my parents, we'd go back all the time, and it just doesn't square remotely. And I think for a lot of people, they've just, I don't think they've ever met people like that, or they don't interact with them at all. It really is funny though. You are, when you're on the coast, you're in a completely different world. And it's funny, my wife's dad, he lives in Florida, and when we meet their friends from Florida, it's like they're from another planet. Right. It's really funny. The stuff they're hooked into. A lot of these people are really into Trump and stuff like that, and they say things that you just do not say here. It always cracks my wife and I up. We enjoy it.
But there are a lot of people that would be shocked to know that you can be a Trump supporter and be kind.
Yeah, and just be fine and normal.
Yeah, exactly. You can see things differently, and it doesn't mean that you're a white supremacist, right? It doesn't. That's absurd to put that label on millions. You can be out in the Midwest, in even a poor rural blue collar area. You can be undereducated. You can look like a slob. You can shop at Walmart and still be a great person. And a lot of these people are. And the way they're talked about and treated is so disrespectful.
Yeah.
By huge swaths, not only huge swaths of the people on the coast, but especially the media and a lot of people on, who kind of control the levers of social media are so, unbelievably dismissive and just the way they talk about these people is so hard. It's really a terrible thing. And if you want to, radicalize people, if you want to, you would treat them the way these people are being treated.
Oh,
and
yeah, exactly.
but the easy thing is to say, oh no, they're all white supremacists. They're all, let's laugh at, how they look. They're all fat. They're all this. They're all that, and be just completely dismissive of these people. And in my experience, firsthand with people that I know and talk to, and distant relatives and people that I work with on the boat, different things. Just some of the greatest, kindest, warmest people that you'll ever meet. And yeah, they might not have an air of sophistication. They might not be, working in, finance like me. Like I was lucky enough to, they might not have had quite the same opportunities. They might not look like they're from, some of the more progressive cities, but that doesn't make them less of people. It doesn't make them less kind. It doesn't give them the same insecurities, the same empathy, that doesn't mean that they hate all gay people. It does not mean that. And I think a lot of people need to expand their horizons and get to know more people to see that for themselves, to see that someone could disagree with you politically. They could be put in this camp where you're just going to say, oh, they're all bad people. They're all this or that. But they're not. They're not. They're still living, breathing people. We all are. We're all in this country together. We're all part of the same team. And, hopefully the pendulum is going to start swinging back and people are going to start to appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope something really ugly doesn't come of it. I've always been fascinated and tried to understand what were the conditions in Germany that gave rise to Nazism, because no one has a good answer to that. And and one thing that I found was very interesting. I was reading about this a couple of years ago. Was that in the late 20s or early 30s, I can't remember which, there were a lot of leftists that would shut down. Someone would would stand up and give a speech, and maybe they were from a conservative party, and leftists would show up and shut it down. And they'd come up and physically stop the speaker. They would do all these aggressive things that you saw happening a few years ago. And that was when apparently Hitler sort of put it together in his head. He was sort of saying these conservatives are fuddy-duddies, they're normies, and they don't get what they're dealing with, but I do. And so I'm going to bring in my own people, and when someone tries to shut it down, we're not going to let them, and we're going to fight them. And what's interesting is that it empowered this extremism on the other side. Rather than this extremism leading towards moderation, it encouraged something that was, couldn't have been worse. And I hope the same thing. I don't think the same thing would happen today. I don't think we're at that point at all. But it's just not good.
Yeah, well, the key thing is the dehumanization of others.
Yeah, exactly.
And, that happened in world affairs, happened other times throughout history. It happened in, Cultural Revolution in China, where, all the most sophisticated people get sent out to the fields. Like, it's happened, many times in history, but it all starts with dehumanization. You could dehumanize the 1%. You could dehumanize, the poor world. You could say all Nazis, like I said in the beginning, oh, you could punch a Nazi, right? But that is also me dehumanizing someone it's the dehumanization that allows you to say, I no longer need to be held to, the ethical standards of the day. I know I can do whatever I want to you because you're less than human, right? The dehumanization is the scariest part. And when you see people being dehumanized, even if they're jerks, even if they, are different or whatever, but that's the next level. That's the level that allows you to say, I can do whatever I want because I'm so much better than you and you're not even a person. Then the rules don't apply anymore. And then if the rules don't apply, then you get to a slippery slope where, evil could be committed because, oh no, it's just committed against, that group and they're so awful and deserving that, all is fair. But the other part of what you talked about, how, the voice of the people was being restricted and then, someone was able to come in and gather that up and use that energy. I mean, that to me, that was, that's the biggest fear that I've had about social media censorship. That's the biggest thing is that say, okay, let's say somebody is putting out, pure, true hate speech, not hate speech like, oh, everyone that disagrees with me is hate speech. Mm-hmm. True hate speech, right? Something that you or I or any thinking person would find, truly repugnant. And they're putting that out on social media. Okay, we're going to ban him, right? We can't, I mean, we believe in free speech, but this is too far. Okay. Well, what happens to that person, right? What happens is they go to, dark corners of the internet, places that are, totally unmonitored, and their hatred festers and grows, and, you don't eliminate it, right? Mm-hmm. You eliminate it by putting it out, by disregarding it or mocking it, or, the sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? And, I think a lot of these people that are pro censorship that have been, increasingly having their hands on controls and getting more and more outrageous with their censorship, don't really realize that what they've truly done is they've taken large amounts of people who maybe have a couple things to say that you or I would disagree with or consider unpopular, but they've taken those people's entire platforms and made them, find other homes and other places where they can gather, where they can grow, and truly outside the system or outside, Facebook or wherever you're going to go, but they are going to find places to gather and grow, and they'll become more powerful that way. I think censorship is going to have all sorts of unintended consequences too, which we haven't yet seen, which I believe we will, unfortunately.
Well, they really think that if they can just stop someone from speaking it, it's no longer real. They really think that if they can make it go unsaid, that somehow it doesn't exist. Right. It's kind of what's that? What's that?
That's the utopianism that you talked about earlier.
Well, it's kind of like the Fed, right? It's manipulating the representation of something, the externalization of it, rather than the thing itself, and then thinking you're doing something. It's to a certain degree it does work, right? It stops ideas from spreading, but you're never going to crush that original sort of impetus. And maybe that's why people are never forgiven for their transgressions when somebody crosses the line for saying something they're not supposed to, and then they say sorry, and then the mob just comes after them even harder. And the reason is because the mob knows the truth, that the person isn't sorry. They're just caving into the pressure.
Well, nobody knows what the rules are.
No.
So look, we have okay, let's say we have rules in a society who say if you walk into a store and you steal an item, then there are sentencing guidelines. So you could expect 30 days in prison, right? Or whatever. Some we know the rules, mm-hmm. right? We know that there are certain, if you jaywalk, you can get a ticket maybe for $100, but you're not going to go to a life sentence in jail because you jaywalked, right? There are certain parameters, there are certain rules about what's accepted behavior or legal behavior in society, specifically legal behavior, right? Mm-hmm. There's certain things. I know that I can, do this. This is against the law, but this is okay, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get into these social things. So let's say somebody's caught on an iPhone, caught on camera. Like there was a woman a couple years ago that was in a dog park, and there's some horrible racist rant to some seemingly short clip. You never know the context, but there was like a black guy that was there. I think he was just bird watching or something, minding his business, and she had some real nasty race. I don't remember the details. Mm-hmm. You might remember this. It was in Central Park, and I remember watching it and thinking, wow, this woman is a horrible person. And everyone, you had the whole pile-on and everything on social. She ended up losing her job, losing this, and there's no rule in society. It's not like, well, it's against the law to be a horrible person and to bother some innocent guy and some racist rant. It's not really a legal thing, right? And there's no parameter. It's not like, well, if you do that and you're caught on a video, then you can expect to have blowback on social media, which seems fair to me. Maybe lose your job, okay. But what is where's the line? At what point, what are we going to execute her? At what point do we say, well, I think maybe guys, she is truly horrible. But we might be going a little too far with this. There's no rules. There's no, and everyone needs to voice their, well, I'm not like her. And I want everyone to know I'm not like her. So I'm going to add on and voice, that I think this woman is awful. And she is awful. But there's no, at what point do we as a society say for these gray areas, for these social issues, do we say that, well, this is the appropriate punishment, right? You should be kicked off of social media, but if you apologize and you say, you express the error of your ways, you can come back after. Nobody really knows. So there's no floor, and nobody's going to come to the defense of somebody who's violated, a social norm, right? Because then you're going to be painted with the same brush of the issues that they were. So it all becomes very, very unclear and very gray, and these slippery slopes apply. I think there are a lot of people that are dealt with on some of these social issues or social platforms, overly harshly, right? But you can't come out and say that, because then what are you, you're excusing somebody who did some deplorable behavior? I'm not doing that, right? So we don't really know. A lot of these things are very new to us as a society, and we don't really know where they're going or what the right way to handle them.
My hope is we just all become numb to it, where it's just, it's sort of like with Bezos being sued by his maids or something for his behavior towards them. I was just like, oh yeah, whatever. She couldn't make eye contact with him or something. Who cares? It's fine. or some cop peed in a ice machine. I was just like, okay, it happens. I don't know. It's a stupid thing. It's weird. It's something I do myself.
Yeah, I think we could all use a little more Zen-like attitude about something.
But I think that's what's going to happen. That's my hope, is that we literally just become anesthetized to it, and we just don't even notice, and we just forgive horrible shit that people do. I wanted to ask you a little bit about FTX. To what degree is that kind of, I don't know. I don't like the term ruling class. It's a little bit paranoid, but there is that. Their sensibilities really dictate everything. But to what degree does that whole FTX thing reflect the ruling class's prejudices and their own fantasies and biases and all that?
So right now it's December 8th. We're recording this. I don't know when you put it out or when people are going to be listening. Things could change quick, right? So it could be that there's a massive sting operation and, there's some regulatory or police body from America or from some country is going to take responsibility and serve justice. And, maybe we read about tomorrow morning that, overnight, 50 armed, with the SEC or the, FBI or somebody from somewhere goes in and arrests the perpetrators of this, pretty obvious crime. But as of today, nothing's happened. Mm-hmm. And, what's pretty obvious is that, this guy, and who knows who was involved, but there's a theft, large scale theft, complicit media, there was very clearly stolen money that was given to politicians and to other, political and do-gooder organizations. And, I think if things don't change, if this stands, and we allow this to stand, to say that, well, enough money was handed off from stolen money, customer money, enough money was handed off here to the right people that had bought political asylum for Sam Bankman-Fried. His father looks like was complicit in his parties. If that stands, and I don't believe it will, but if that does, I think that's going to be a real threshold moment that the cost of doing that is going to be so substantial that, the people that are allowing that to happen are in for a very rude awakening, because there's a level of corruption that humans won't stand. And look, I didn't lose money in FTX. I don't even know if I know anyone personally. I know some people online. I don't know if I know anyone personally in my direct, realm of contacts that has lost money. But the idea that you can literally buy virtue points, not only buy them with stolen money, but by giving money to the right people, you can buy enough virtue points that you're going to be treated, not as a thief, but as somebody, I mislabeled your wallet as my wallet. Oops. The treatment that he's gotten so far is so outrageous, outrageously offensive to any thinking person and inconsistent with how we treat thieves in society. It's a shocking. I'm still trying to deal with it. Like I said, I'm still kind of expecting that there's going to be some big fallout of this thing coming soon in the next couple of days. It's been like a month now, and the fact that nothing's happened yet is already enough, I think, to open people's eyes to the level of corruption that we have now in the world. Mm-hmm. I think there's a contingent of these effective altruists or people on the left that are so fervently religious that they believe in the greater good. So, okay, you're going to steal money from crypto speculators. We'll say they're all greedy. They're all trying to make money outside the system. They deserve it anyway. And we're going to take their money and we're going to give it to causes that are so virtuous. So a Joe Biden re-election campaign is such a net good for the world that it's worth it. You're doing this is a positive thing. You're reallocating money from people undeserving of it or unworthy, and you're giving it to good causes. And that is such a virtuous thing that, the ends justify the means.
Do you think that's...
And that is truly horrific, horrible thinking. I mean, forgetting about the fact that, considering a politician, any politician of any party, to be a virtuous recipient of money, not even stolen money, but of money, like donating money to a politician, to me is just a dirty act in of itself. The idea that, but even, let's put that aside. Let's say even if he was giving money to, let's say there's a homeless shelter, and we can all agree, everyone agrees that this is a virtuous recipient of the money, and he stole money. To say that you're going to say that the ends justify the means, the net good of what you're doing with the money is so good that we're going to allow you to steal money to do it, and it'll still be socially acceptable, is repugnant, awful thinking. And that's going to, I mean, that will lead to a slippery slope that'll allow any, I mean, where would that end, right? If we allow that to stand, right? And then there's the aspect of the pure political corruption. So, were there connections? To me, the connections against her look a little bit contrived. Yeah, he might have worked with the father of Caroline. There's some overlapping of circles, but I don't see any smoking gun on that. But there were clearly political connections in other aspects. I mean, the guy's mother literally ran a super PAC and was responsible for doling out cash to politicians. Yeah. So, was immunity from this thing bought? I don't know. I mean, it looks like there's I can't say that conclusively. I know what everyone else knows. I've been reading about it. I don't have any proprietary insight here, but it certainly seems like that's a possibility. And if over the course of time, it becomes clear that that was in fact the case, which if nothing further happens now, I think you can make that case. I don't know where that ends. I mean, that's going to be a loss in the faith. Me personally, I will lose my faith in the system. Whatever faith I have left, I think a lot of people will. I think it's going to be a real eye-opening moment. And if we don't have faith in the system, in some basic baseline fairness of the system, if there's no faith in that, what do we have? What do we even have? Are we a country? Are we a united country? Are we just different warring factions of people that are willing to rob from each other? I mean, I don't know where that ends. And not in a good place.
I thought a lot of these people who have sort of taken it easy on SBF were the people who hated crypto. I'm kind of confused about that because it seems like things have shifted in that landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
But I don't know when that changed because I always thought crypto was kind of demonized as something. It was kind of the last refuge of gold bugs and people who want to do DeFi and all this stuff that a lot of these people who are defending SBF don't want. And it's contrary to their interests. But suddenly it's shifted somehow in the last few months. It seems like it's kind of thrown me for a loop. I can't keep up with it. The people that I've
seen defending SBF. Yeah, well, the people that I've seen defending SBF, and when I say defending, I'm including in that being kind of soft in their response. So, let's hear them out. Maybe there was an accounting confusion or, like twisting themselves in a pretzel to try to think the best of them. There's no ideological consistency. It's not like they were pro-crypto or against or pro. There's no ideological consistency. It's very clearly people that have a bias towards, kind of lessening the severity of what was done, or towards this guy in particular, or towards some sort of greater good that was that this facilitated. But yeah, they might have been anti-crypto, pro-crypto. I mean, there's no consistent ideological ethos that is like, oh no, I'm pro SBF because I'm pro crypto or pro. There's nothing. I mean, even like you look at like O'Leary had some statements. I read it 5 times. I couldn't believe it. He said he would invest in this guy. This guy is so uniquely brilliant that even though he made a mistake, he just made a mistake. He's still a good guy. He would invest in him again. It's like, don't you have any ethical base? Like, you would invest in a guy who's a thief, clearly, who's incompetent, and we're simultaneously told that this guy is so uniquely brilliant. He was able to do the sushi arb, and he was kimchi arb, yeah. but he's so uniquely brilliant. He's this amazing arbitrator. Also, by the way, a programmer who is able to build this exchange. Also, by the way, a proprietor of a hedge fund. Also, by the way, he's all these things. But he's also simultaneously, he's just a kid. He's a 30-year-old man. Oh, he's just a kid. He got in a little over his head. He lost track. Yeah, he lost track and accidentally spent billions with a B of money that other people had and used it to buy a friendship with Tom Brady and to put his name on the FTX arena and to pay off politicians. Oops, that was just an oversight. Like, come on. And it's like, there are people that, are out there that want to either believe that or want to, create that sense of doubt and that, positioning of it. But, I wouldn't even look at their previous positions on crypto because there's no consistent ideological basis to think that other than, some sort of, weird, either a direct payoff or some sort of weird, benefit that they're getting for that.
Yeah. I only have you for a few more minutes. I agreed to keep this under 50 minutes. I wanted to ask you what it is like emotionally being a Lions fan, because I'm a Patriots fan, and we just, our season is, we're I think we're 6-5 right now, and that to us is just basically the season's over. It's a disaster. I'm trying to get my wife to cancel our cable. I only agreed to keep it so we could watch the freaking Pats. I've been trying to get rid of this thing. We pay $2,500 a year for cable that I don't even want in order to watch the Patriots. My wife is obsessed too, and I've sort of said we need to get rid of it. But we have such riches as fans. I didn't even realize people like you existed out there. And what is it like?
So, I get tricked every year. Every year I think this is the year, they're on the upswing, things are looking great. And
That's very American
year,
of you. That's an American poor person.
Right? I've got two sons. One's 15, one's 13. That's like perfect football age before they've like discovered like sex and other distractions. Like they are obsessed. One of them plays football. So we're really into it as a family, and we watch all the games. We go to a couple games every year, and every year preseason, I'm like, oh no, I think this or that goes right. I think they can make the playoffs. I think they're looking good. And this year in particular, I really like the coach. I really like a lot of the players on the team. I think Amon-Ra is like incredibly underrated. Swift, I thought was going to have it. I'm really into it, right? So this year, I'm like, no, guys, this is the year. This is the year I think they can do really well. And then they start off 1-6, and I was like, man, they got me again. Like, we talk about those behavioral biases in investing, right? It's like, the kind of the same things at play. It's like, yeah, I want to believe. I'm like trying to convince myself, but objectively, this team is horrible. They're always horrible. They don't have the personnel. And I remember, the fans here in Detroit are so incredibly negative. Like as soon as they went 1-2, they lost their second game. People already are like, calling for everyone to get fired and this and that. And like, guys, like give them some time. It doesn't happen overnight. But when they hit that 1-6 mark this year, I said, I was tricked. They're horrible, and they're always going to. And then sure enough, they just went on a 4-game winning streak, and they're looking pretty damn good right now. And they're not out of the playoffs. So. Now I'm buying in again. That's the cycle of it. It's hope springs eternal. So I grew up. I grew up, like I said, in New York as a Jets fan, which also was not very fun. But I grew up a huge Mets fan. There, I was like obsessed with the Mets when I was growing up, and we had the Yankees right next door, kicking our asses every single year, doing great. And the Mets are horrible year after year. And every year I would be like, no, I think this is the year. We got Todd Hundley and Bernard Gilkey and Butch Husky, like whoever like was on the team at the time. Like, I could see it, these guys. And year after year, you get disappointed. It's the same thing with the Lions. But look, every year that, even now, I think, look, if this or that goes right, they win, 4 of the 5 next games, they're in position to make the playoffs. That's kind of the fun of it. It's deluding yourselves to being a little bit of an unrealistic optimist, and maybe once in a while it'll happen. And I can assure you this, the Lions do win the Super Bowl. We'll enjoy it more than you'll enjoy yet another Patriots win. It'll be a life-changing, earth-shattering event. So it's fun.
Well, now we've fallen to earth. It's terrible. It's awful. I'm so used to things just kind of working out. Usually there's this wonderful drama where everyone says Brady's washed up and they hate him, and then he pulls it out. It's like fiction. What's this guy's life? His professional life is like fiction. And he's even said it. He said, so many of these things I dreamed of happening to me actually happened. And I thought about it. It doesn't work like that with anybody else. It just kind of happened. There was the randomness kind of broke in his favor for whatever reason, but it doesn't work like that for really anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, the real interesting thing was that debate, was it Belichick or was it Brady that was, kind of responsible for the magic? And I think now we conclusively know, it was Brady. It's interesting.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting, but it's really changed. I don't know. It's not as fun. I feel like a regular person again, and it's awful. It's like I was really rich and then something happened to me, and now I'm just like everybody else. It's awful, and I hate it. I'm really resentful and angry.
Yeah. Welcome back to the real world.
My son was asking about Barry Sanders. He just learned about Barry Sanders, and I was saying I think he's the greatest runner ever. There's just no human being that's anywhere close to this guy in terms of his running skills as a running back. And my son was saying, did he win a lot of Super Bowls? And I said, no, they didn't even go to the playoffs. Did they? They didn't go to the playoffs with Barry Sanders.
I think they did one year. They didn't win a playoff.
Okay, maybe they didn't win a playoff game. But he was basically, we were basically sort of like, what happened to him? He went to Detroit. That's what happened to this poor man. He got sent to the Lions.
Yeah, well, we're going to change, you got to change the culture. You got to change the management. You got to change the player development. You got to change the drafting, right? There's a lot. It doesn't just, it's not about just changing a couple guys on the field. You need a whole grounds up transition. And they've done that several times unsuccessfully. But again, every few years they try it again. And I think this one looks a little more promising. I really like Brad Holmes, the GM. I think has done a good time. They've a good job. They've had some good drafts. It's a very young team still. And I remain optimistic. As if what do they call it? The gel man amnesia, right? Like as if nothing else happened before. I look at them like, oh, the Lions are going to perpetually underperform your expectations, and then the next season comes. I'm like, no. This time they brought in the right people. They brought in the right management. This time I think they're actually going to pull it off. And I'm just going to continue to delude myself every year until they do.
It's funny. The randomness of it is very similar to it's even worse than the investment business. Because really, if you don't get a top 10 quarterback, you just don't have a real team. It's very rare for a team to win without that. But so basically, Bill Belichick, we talk about him being one of the greatest coaches. He got Tom Brady. But even look at all these other coaches. Bruce Arians down in Tampa. He'd never won a Super Bowl or anything like that. People are saying he's a genius. Tom Brady fell into his lap and he got his Super Bowl. And it's like that with everybody. You're just kind of hanging out and hoping you get one of those top 10, maybe even top 5 quarterbacks. And if you don't, you're screwed, and that's just it.
Yeah, and the correlation between, the top pick, like it's still very hard to get it. Mahomes was like a number 19 pick, I think, or something like that. Some of the best guys, Burrow was a number 1 overall, but Justin Herbert, I think, was the 3rd quarterback taken in his draft, and the league is littered with former number 1, number 2, number 3 overall picks, a quarterback that have not lived up to hype. So it's not easy. It's you have a limited amount of drafting. I don't envy the GMs because drafting these guys on the information they have at the time of the draft it's a total crapshoot. So what they develop themselves into, whether they stay healthy. There's so many unknowns. The beauty of sports and finance, I think a lot of people that have a love for both, as you and I clearly do, is it's kind of a combination of analysis or, trying to understand things and quantify them, but also the element of luck and the element of surprise and the element of the unknown. And, it's just like that with investments. You could do a lot of due diligence and figure out the intrinsic value or have the best macro thesis in the world. And at the end of the day, you're going to be beholden to factors that are totally outside anything you could have predicted as a large part of what, the end up results look like. It's the same thing in sports. You just don't know. You can do the best you can. Luck favors the prepared. You can, do the best you can to quantify things, to put yourself in a position to win, to put yourself in a position to draft right, to do things for the long term. But at the end of the day, there's no guarantee that work is going to lead to success, and there's no guarantee that the success is going to be reflective of how good your decisions were.
Yeah, I'm always shocked by the degree to which we're all factor investors to some degree, not to 100%. But I see all these value investors who beat themselves up and they sort of say, well, I made this bad decision in 2016 and this and that. And the reality is no one who does value has outperformed for the last 10 years or the last 5 years. There's virtually no one. And the people who have stopped being value investors. So they just left the factor behind. It's fascinating how that works. How much everyone correlates.
I think it's so interesting, the whole idea of value investing. Maybe we'll hit that on the next episode. But I just think that the idea that you can be right about what an asset is truly worth, used to matter in the markets. And then you can show everyone, hey, look, here's all my work, here's all my research, here's the intrinsic value, here's this and that, and then expect the market to true up the trading value to the intrinsic value. And if you're a good value investor, that's how it's supposed to work. And, what we have now is a market where intrinsic value doesn't really matter, where narratives are driving flows. And, you could be the greatest value investor in the world. If you can't create a narrative around why something should be going up or down, irregardless of what it's truly worth, of its intrinsic value, then it's just meaningless. Nobody cares that an asset is truly worth something different than what it's trading at. It's just not part of the driving factor anymore for stocks, in my opinion, which might be a controversial take. But I think that's why value investing hasn't been working. And I imagine there will be a day where it will work again, where those things will matter. But right now in the markets, intrinsic value or what something should be worth relative to its peers or any model that you can come up with does not really matter as much as what are the narratives that you can create to get people's attention, to get flows to push something in the short term.
Yeah, I'm hoping that changes soon as well. Phil, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks,
Take
Scott.
care.